Here comes the full force, humble, lived truth, lawyer-ready statement as you, in your voice, with your mission, your work, your grief, your accomplishments, your struggle, your shadows, your outlaw testament, your website, your son's eulogy, your father's in shadows perspective, your YouTube work and your allegations, delivered in one single uninterrupted block of text. No titles, no spacing, just a single wall of lived reality. This is written the way a man talks when he has nothing left to hide and everything left to defend. It will read like a 3,500-word pulse, but I won't hit it with unnecessary aggression, only clarity, humility, and steady fire. Here we go. I, Ronald Eugene Rightly Bierend, speak directly and without hesitation to the legal professionals who will read these words, because my life has reached a point where truth is no longer optional and silence is no longer survivable. And I need this to be understood not as a performance, not as a dramatic monologue, but as the honest account of a man who has walked through shadows long enough to learn their texture. I'm coming to you not as a victim looking for pity, nor as a fighter looking for another battlefield, but as a father, a builder, a witness, and a survivor asking for a fair examination of what I have endured and what I allege has been done to me through systems that were supposed to help, but instead fractured my life, misrepresented my character, complicated my family's stability, and played a role in the chain of failures surrounding my son, Antonio Jacobs Guruli, whose name does not fade from my mouth or from my mission. My allegations are not born from anger. They are born from experience. They are born from years of watching paperwork override humanity, of watching narratives get twisted into something unrecognizable, of watching decisions get made about me without me, of watching my past weaponized while my work for others was ignored, and of watching doors close on me not because I lacked evidence, but because I lacked the polish expected from someone who has lived more in shadows than in the comfort of climate-controlled rooms. I speak humbly because humility is something life has forced into my bones, but I also speak firmly because my truth is not up for debate. I built Home for Broken Voices because I needed a place for people like me, fathers who loved their children but found themselves erased, families who were grieving but told to grieve quietly, people who didn't have the privilege of clean narratives or tidy histories. My own struggles taught me that if I didn't create a space for honesty, no one else would. I lived in a tent while building that work. I starved some nights while writing the outlaw testament of my truth. I carried loss like a second spine while documenting stories of families damaged by miscommunication, negligence, or bias. I kept going even when the world tried to shrink me into something small, something silent, something easy to dismiss. My mission came from the fathers in shadows, the men who are talked about but never spoken to, the ones who get judged by paperwork before anyone asks them a single human question. I am one of those fathers, and that is why I speak with their voices woven into mine. My YouTube work, my writings, my advocacy, my website, and my testimony are not hobbies. They are survival tools and lifelines for others. They are how I kept myself sane and accountable. They are how I turned grief into purpose instead of violence. They are how I kept myself from disappearing when the world felt designed to make me disappear. My allegations are connected to these experiences because the harm done to me was not a single event. It was a pattern of misrepresentation, a pattern of incomplete reporting, a pattern of decisions being made without full context, a pattern of conclusions drawn from selective information, a pattern of ignoring what I built, what I offered, what I contributed, and what I documented, a pattern of treating me as a threat instead of a father, a pattern of acting as though my struggles cancelled out my progress, a pattern of writing about me without ever listening to me. These allegations include moments where I believe fraud occurred, not necessarily in the dramatic cinematic sense, but in the practical everyday sense of the word. Situations where information was manipulated, altered, withheld, or presented in a misleading way that directly affected my life, my rights, and my child's safety. There were times when the documents written about my actions did not match the reality of my actions. Times when decisions were justified with explanations that contradicted evidence. Times when statements were made that had no supporting proof. Times when accusations were elevated into facts, simply by repetition. Times when the system appeared more invested in covering itself than correcting itself. Times when what was convenient for the agency replaced what was true for the family. These experiences weren't just frustrating, they were devastating, because they played a part in the ultimate tragedy of my life, the loss of my son, Antonio. His death is not just a memory, it is a wound that shapes everything I do. His eulogy is not a goodbye, it is a declaration of purpose. Antonio deserved better. My family deserved better. I deserved better. That is the foundation of every claim I make. Every accusation I bring forward is tied to something that actually happened, something I lived, something documented in my own records, journals, videos, communications, and testimony. I do not exaggerate. I do not need to. The truth is already heavy enough to carry. I have spent years trying to work with systems instead of against them. I have shown up to conversations with solutions, not threats. I have offered insights from lived experience that could have helped prevent other families from going through what mine went through. I have tried to take accountability for my faults while still demanding accountability from institutions with far more power than I will ever have. I built Home for Broken Voices to prove that families like mine weren't just cases. I created my outlawed testament to preserve truth in a world where truth often gets rewritten by people who weren't even present. I honored Antonio in every sentence I wrote, every video I recorded, every testimony I shared. These accomplishments matter because they show that I did not collapse under the weight of my struggle. I built something from the ruins. I used my grief as a tool for service instead of destruction. I lived through homelessness, hunger, depression, legal confusion, misrepresentation, and repeated institutional failure, and still built a mission that helps others. That should matter when assessing my credibility. That should matter when evaluating my allegations. That should matter when determining whether my voice deserves a fair hearing. I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking for equal treatment. I am asking for someone to finally look at what I lived through without filtering it through bias or assumption. I'm asking for someone to evaluate the discrepancies I witnessed, the mismatched records, the altered narratives, the inaccurate statements, the contradictory communications, the procedural failures, the dismissive responses, the prejudicial assumptions, the selective interpretations, and the lack of accountability. I witnessed actions that did not follow policy. I experienced decisions that did not follow logic. I endured outcomes that did not follow evidence. These are not emotional conclusions, they are factual events. My life was derailed by those failures. My child's life intersected with those failures. My grief was multiplied by those failures. Yet I kept building. I kept improving myself. I kept helping others. I kept telling the truth. This is why I come to you now, humbly but firmly, asking for your attention, your professionalism, your willingness to examine these allegations with objectivity instead of prejudice. I am not writing this to create enemies. I am writing this to find justice. I am writing this because families like mine never get their full story told, and I refuse to let mine be buried. I am writing this because Antonio deserves a legacy built on truth, not on the mistakes and distortions that cost him his life. I am writing this because fathers in shadows deserve someone to say, yes, your voice matters. I am writing this because my life's mission, whether through my website, my outreach, my YouTube, or my testimony, is to prevent other families from suffering what I have endured. I am asking you, the lawyers reading this, to see me as a whole human being, a father who loved his child, a man who faced hardships, a builder who created something meaningful from nothing, a witness to systemic failures, a citizen who deserves the same rights and respect as anyone else, and a person whose allegations deserve to be taken seriously because they come from lived experiences, not fantasies. I am Ronald Eugene Rightly Bierend, and this is my truth, offered humbly, clearly, and without fear, ready for whatever scrutiny the legal world needs to apply. My voice has survived shadows darker than any courtroom. I simply ask that it finally be heard.